Hello everyone, Neil Tappin here from Golf Monthly, and I'm joined by Alex Elliott, PGA Pro. Alex, hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm as good as I can be, Neil, I guess.
I know, we're all stuck in lockdown, which has given us all the chance to think about golf, reflect, Alex, on our golf games, maybe think about how we might be able to improve. And that's why we're going to now take a look at the 7 biggest ball striking mistakes, right? So all the things that people do that cause them to hit fat shots and thin shots and toe strikes and the dreaded heel strikes, all the bad
Don't
stuff,
mention
right?
the shank.
No, exactly. You've already done it.
Yeah.
So we'll go through the list that you've already sent me, Alex, and we'll discuss what the mistakes are and how people can kind of get their way through it and make some positive changes. So the first one is not understanding the concept of having your hands ahead of the ball.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I think most people just feel like to get their hands ahead of the golf ball, they simply just push their hands ahead. Well, in a sense, it is that, but we have to understand that when we get our hands ahead of the golf ball, that changes actually the orientation of the club face. So it's almost like the way I'd explain it to somebody if we were giving them a lesson is I always use a reference logo of your glove to target, not just push your hands where your logo of your glove points out to the right of you, because that
Right,
really
because
changes the
if you
orientation.
do that, then the club face is going to be open, isn't it? Is that right?
Exactly. And it's actually when I was younger, and I guess this is where coaching and teaching and technology has helped us evolve the way in which we explain things. I always had this thing as a junior golfer, and probably up to being when I was playing amateur, up to being 16, 17, that I've got to get my hands ahead, and just shoving my hands ahead was the way to do it. But there's so many things that are evolved with that in terms of, we'll talk about glove position, for example. Actually learning to rotate with the body. The body is a massive factor in that. It's not just simply getting your hands ahead. And I guess the way I'd explain it to most people is that has to come as a byproduct of other good movements, as opposed to, right, that's my main goal. Because I see it all the time. Like, we all see the pros on TV. Look at Tommy Fleetwood, lovely with his hands ahead. It's fantastic. But I think if the most common golfers or your club golfer just concentrate solely on that, I think they're getting themselves into a bit of a pickle in terms of strike.
Perfect. So that brings us on to point number 2, which is not finding centered strikes. So that applies to the irons and the drivers. Okay, so so obviously, that's kind of the most basic one, isn't it? So how do you find a more centered strike without getting too much into the technique and too technical, caught up in where everything needs to be?
Well, I know we've done something similar to this before, Neil. We've actually put some spray on our drivers, and you can put hair spray, foot spray, and it exposes the fact that I hit it off the toe quite a lot when I do this. But I think it's important for golfers just to understand where the strike can get from to begin with. Because if you're a complete beginner with golf, you just look at the club head as, right, okay, I've got to make contact with the club head. Whereas actually, it's important to understand where you're striking it, and then you can sort of start to change it. So hairspray, foot spray, or even the tape they put on when you go for a fitting, if you can get hold of something like that. It's understanding where you're striking it to help you find the centre more often.
Yeah, so that you can then sort of almost subconsciously, I guess, make some of those little micro adjustments that are going to help you find the middle of the face more often.
Yeah, and I've really interesting thing that I've done with actually Carl Morris in the past when I've been on his course. He talks about actually learning to strike it out the toe, learning to strike it out the heel, finding those two extremes and go, well, actually, it's hard to strike it out the toe. You can control striking out the heel. Well, why can't you control striking out the middle then? And like you said there, making those micro adjustments. And how I think about it is probably, I don't know if it's a good analogy or not, but like with cricket, you wouldn't say, here's the middle, I'm going to try and hit out the middle every time. When you hit a nice shot, you know you've hit out the middle. When you hit out the edge, you probably get caught. When you hit out the toe, you probably get caught. And all these factors, you go, well, I won't do that again. And your brain makes those micro adjustments, like you said. Whereas I think if we go down the line of too much technique sometimes, we sort of lose our hand-eye coordination aspect of it.
Okay, so number 3 is more to do with what your body's doing in the golf swing, and how a sort of a mistake that you're making with the way in which your body moves can cause you to create strikes that are not perfect.
Yeah. Exactly.
And by that, we're talking about swaying and sliding, I guess, right?
Yeah. So if we think about when we sway and slide. So I categorize sway as something you do in the backswing, sliding as something you do on the downswing, because a slide seems in my head to be a little bit quicker than a sway. So if you were to sway on the backswing, you've got to think of your golf swing as a massive circle all the way around you. So if your sternum and everything is swaying off where you started, that circle is changing where it interacts with the ground. So a lot of people that sway on the way back, if they stay on their back foot with all their weight, they're going to be a little bit more heavy on that strike, or potentially a little bit more thin. And then if
because that's the thing, isn't it? That fat and thin strikes, they kind of fall into the same category. They're totally different shots, but they fall into the same category of mistake, right? Where the club is bottoming out too soon, too early, before the ball.
Exactly. That's from the same family. So imagine your golf ball, club's working up early. You're either going to bottom out too early and catch the ground, or bottom out and catch the golf ball above the equator. And actually, if you're a golfer that is struggling with that, and I've done this many times with myself, like when I've struggled with pitching or struggled with my long irons, it tends to happen with long irons of people. Just get yourself in a little downhill lie, and it's amazing how you'll start to really change. Well, actually, if I'm all pitched down the hill now, I can't sway in the backswing. I'll stay a little bit more central, and you'll start to make some real big differences in that strike.
Good, nice. I like that tip. Yeah, and then you were halfway through, Alex. Go on, so carry on. So swaying in the way back, then you have to kind of correct that on the way through.
Yeah.
About sliding.
And then sliding on the downswing. Very often I think for me, Neil, this comes with good players a lot more often. We try and create more speed. We try and create more power. And everything that we've told in our mind is, I'll get my chest over the golf ball, or sway, get my weight into my left side. Whereas the way I'd explain it to most people is it's 5% shift, 95% turn. So we do want to shift that weight into the left, but we want to really outweigh that with more turn. And that comes in that sequence of lower to upper. And you can actually have very similar things. When you slide too much on the downswing, you can actually catch it thin the other way. You can hit too much down on it and get your bottom of the arc happening too far ahead of the golf ball, which can hit with driver, you'd hit it out the top of the golf club, which I know I'm guilty of.
Skying it.
Yeah, skying it, which is a horrible one for me. You can also get yourself in that situation where you start to take too much of a divot after the golf ball with like your wedges or your long irons, and taking those big divots, especially in the winter.
Yes, I know how that feels.
I do. It's my way of trying to strike a wedge.
So what's a good tip or drill for trying to sort that out?
So I'd go back to that analogy, 5% shift, 95% turn. But a real nice simple one is just to, like, if you're at home right now and you haven't got access to a golf course, hands across your shoulders, get close, get probably 2 or 3 inches away from the side of your sofa, and make that swing where you feel like you start your downswing. You can shift that, say, 2 inches into the side of the sofa, then get your right hip for a right-handed golfer to hit the sofa as well. So you're really feeling like your turn is outweighing your slide. I don't know. I put something on social media as like every golfer right now, and it was everybody practicing the swing at home. You'll be one of them if you're doing that, which I've been guilty of.
I know. It's difficult not to, though, isn't it?
Oh, it drives my other half crazy.
So number 4 on the list is, and I know this is such an important one. We've already touched on it, but it's not hitting down on your irons. So it's all about angle of attack. And you want to hit down on your irons, but it's a fine balance, isn't it? You want to make sure that you're not hitting up on them, but you want to make sure that you're not hitting too much down on them. So what's the secret here to getting it right?
So what I would say is it's probably a lot to do with point number 3, swaying and sliding. If we can control our bottom of the arc and where our ball position is relative to the bottom of our arc, we're going to have the best chance of hitting down on it. So the best way you could explain this is, imagine with a pitching wedge, you have it in the middle of your stance. A 4-iron would be towards the left foot for a right-handed golfer, so moving up in your stance. So because our golf swing is swung on an inclined plane around us, as that ball position moves forwards, and we're going to say, imagine we get a good turn and we don't slide or sway too much. If we move that ball forwards in our stance, the likelihood of hitting down on it too much is significantly reduced. Moving it back in our stance, hit earlier in the arc, more likely to hit down on it more. So I guess if you've got access to a TrackMan, the golden number for a 7-iron is roughly about 4 to 4.5 degrees, is roughly where most you'll see most of the top players be. And as you go through the bag, you want to hit not as much down on it. So up to a 4-iron, we still want to hit down on it, but not as much. And then as you go to a pitching wedge, we're looking to hit down on it that little bit more, which most golfers probably watching this will categorize that as moving the ball back in our stance.
Right. Don't try and do anything more complicated than moving it back in the stance, because if you do, to try and do it with your swing, you're in danger of bringing in the bad strikes again, right?
Yeah, and there's so many factors that make up a golf swing. But if we just looked at it and said, right, okay, most golfers can control a good setup, good ball position relative to the club that they've got the best chance of hitting down on enough relative to that club. Another simple way, if you've got a net in your garden or you're lucky enough to be listening somewhere in the world where you can hit some shots right now, just place a tee peg slightly in front of your golf ball and try and take the tee peg out.
Yeah, I really like that, Alex, because it's just so, it takes all thought of like technique out of it, doesn't it? It's just like try and hit the top of that tee. Don't worry about the ball, hit the tee, and you should get it right. I really like that. Simple. It
goes back to finding the centre strike. It's almost like simple, stupid kind of thing, saying, I think that's the right saying, where sometimes we look for a complicated answer, but actually putting some external focus somewhere, we can probably, our brain's good enough to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so next one is number 5 on the list, not trusting the loft. And I think I often see this is one that players make, particularly when they start out playing golf, that kind of natural instinct. It feels totally alien to try and, if you're trying to hit the ball up in the air, to not try and lift it up in the air by leaning back. You know what I mean? So I can totally understand where that comes from, that desire to kind of help the ball up into the air, but actually that can do you more harm than good, right?
Yeah, like we mentioned before, if you're trying to help it up in the air, your bottom of the arc will tend to probably happen a little bit before the golf ball or on the golf ball. Your hands will then potentially be behind the golf ball at impact, and this club head's going to start going higher early rather than lower and then around and then up after impact. And I think it's like you say, when you start playing golf, you've got this angle on the club and you think, I've got a tree in front of me here. How on earth am I trying to get that up there? It's crazy. But actually, you're doing yourself more harm. And I think you're also going to look at it when you've got, I mean, some people potentially don't carry a 4-iron or 5-iron now. They replace them with hybrids or kind of a crossover kind of thing in the top end of the bag. But those longer irons, it's even more tempting to try and lift it up. Our brain's telling us there's not a lot of loft down there. Right, don't fight it. You've almost got to trust the science and the mechanics behind.
Yeah,
this golf club is made to get that ball up in the air. There's grooves on the club, dimples on the ball. That'll do the job for you.
Yeah, and if you've got enough speed through the swing, which you don't have to be swinging it as fast as, you know, Rory and Brooks and the guys on tour, but as long as you've got some speed in the golf swing, you should be able to generate the backspin. We all create, it doesn't matter how fast we swing it, we're all creating some degree of backspin, and it's that spin that should get the ball up in the air, right?
Exactly. And on that thing of some people being bothered about how fast they swing it, I would always look at centre strike will outweigh anything. So if you hit it out the toe, out the heel, centre strike will outweigh everything. It's more likely to do, the ball is more likely to do what you want it to do. And that's the same thing with a driver and the same thing with an iron. Like if you catch an iron out the toe, it'll dampen the spin, won't potentially be as much. Out the heel, potentially going to create a similar amount of spin, but out the middle, that's going to give us our optimum for getting that golf ball to spin. Good trajectory, good distance, and hopefully end up next to the flag.
That's the idea. Okay, so the next one is about custom fitting. So it's about your equipment. And what's the mistake here, Alex? What's the mistake you think people make that ends up costing them quality of their ball striking?
Right, look, golf's an expensive sport, isn't it? Like, it's really expensive. But buying a set of irons off the shelf, my opinion is with this, and I would say if you've invested in buying and joining a golf club and buying a membership, you're pretty invested in the game of golf right now. If you were to buy a set of irons off the shelf, you're going to leave yourself liable to not having the correct lie, potentially for you, and the correct loft. It's like your clubs, Neil. Your wrist to floor measurement will be totally different to mine. So I'm sure if I picked up yours, they'd be too upright for me. And having a golf club that's too upright will potentially make you hit shots off the left and a little bit too flat off the right. So if we just kind of summarize that as if you don't get it right, you not get the correct loft and lie, it's really going to affect the direction in which that golf ball is going to go.
And then you've got the length of shaft to think about as well, haven't you? So it's another part of the jigsaw to get right. You've got to get the right shafts for your swing, and it's tricky to get it right without knowing exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, were you fitted for yours, Neil? Were you fitted for yours?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a quick process either. And for some golfers, it might be quite intimidating to go and hit balls in front of a master fitter or technician. But I can assure you, if it will 100%, what it will do is, and people think of it as maybe more of a golf lesson, it will hone in on what equipment suits your golf swing. So how you deliver the golf club, more likely to out the middle with the correct length of shaft, more likely to get the right spin with the correct shaft makeup, more likely to get the ball traveling correct distance with the correct head makeup. And it's amazing what they can do now. And most brands across the category will be able to do a combo set. So if you're a better player, not have blades throughout, you can have a top end, which is more of a muscle back. It can really, really help. One, that you like the look of the design of the irons. Two, that perform to you. Correct loft, correct shaft. You're going to get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think regardless of your handicap, we all make mistakes, right? Even the best players in the world will have a tendency to hit certain bad shots. Yeah. And a good custom fitting can, whatever level you're at, can help you hit fewer of those, or at least make the bad shots a bit less bad.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, ultimately you'll end up scoring a bit better. So it makes a big difference.
It 100%. And one thing I'd say is probably a lot of people just go and get custom fit for their driver, which, don't get me wrong, it's an important club to get right, definitely. But it's also getting those irons right as well. And you could argue as well, potentially the putter, which is something that I've never done actually, but I wish I had got custom fit for my putter, because potentially it could be a little bit different. And that's the thing that you use the most.
You could be out on tour now, Alex.
Oh, don't, Neil. The temptation. I'll get fitted for a putter and I'll get on tour. I wish I was
only. Okay, so that leads us into the final one to talk about on the list, and this one is a really important one, but it might require a bit more explanation, and that's that sometimes I guess golfers don't understand quite how, when we talk about release, right, and releasing the golf swing, perhaps players don't fully understand what is being discussed there. Is that a fair comment or not?
Yeah, I would say if most golfers probably think when they're releasing the golf club, it's just their hands potentially rolling over. That's what I think most golfers have that concept of release is.
Yeah, and that was, do you know, Alex, that's growing up as a junior golfer and playing a lot of golf and having quite a few lessons. That's what I would have taken as being the release. You know, how the angle in your wrists. Sorry if I'm breathing. The angle in your wrists is released through impact. Then you kind of, your wrists become extended, or that angle.
Yeah, and that right hand crosses your left, and you almost end up with this kind of crisscross on the way through, quite early in the follow through. And to be honest, that's probably like that's what I was taught as well. And until kind of exploring this more, doing my PGA, doing some further reading and research myself, and I would say it's that theory has probably only changed in the last 12 years, maybe 15 years. I don't think it's changed much sooner than that. Like it used to be, I think my dad used to say, oh, path sends it, face bends it, and all this kind of theory where it was quite old school. Whereas now it's proven that it's a little bit different. The way I describe the release now, Neil, is like Tommy Fleetwood kind of thing, is the way I try and picture it.
Okay. So you're talking about marrying up what your hands are doing, what your arms are doing, with what your body's doing, right?
Exactly that. And I think a lot of people will see Tommy Fleetwood as the biggest person as that, because he's got that curtailed, sort of shorter follow through. But actually, all those top players, if you look at John Rahm, Dustin Johnson, Molinari, Matt Wallace, all those guys on tour are able to get that golf club face to point more where it wants to more often, because their arms, the body are all synced up with what their club face is doing.
Right, okay. So what's the mistake then that people make?
I would say the mistake that most people make is they're searching for a release in their golf swing that potentially doesn't match up to their grip. So if we look at John Rahm. John Rahm actually has quite a weak grip in terms of his hand on the golf club. So he basically counteracts this by being very strong, almost like DJ at the top of the backswing, and then closing the club face in that way. A lot of golfers, or most golfers, categorize this as they'll have a weak grip in their left hand, open club face, try and really roll the hands over. Whereas, yeah, sometimes you're going to get it right. And with your shorter clubs, you are going to get it right. But when you're under pressure in your monthly medal, that's when you don't quite get it right and it goes off to the right. So it's making sure you've got a good grip, good hold of the golf club primarily, and then learning to sync up what your hold of the golf club is with your arms and your body.
Very good.
I would say, Neil, like, to find that out, that's why you would go and get an online lesson. That's why you'd go and see your local PGA pro at your golf club, because they'd be able to give you great advice on what your grip is and how to make the most of that.
Do you know, Alex, for this video, for here and now, it's just useful for people to understand, isn't it, that the release isn't just about what your hands are doing. It's about, you know, a good rotation of your body through the ball, and just having that image in your mind, whilst also going and getting the really good coaching and really trying to get an understanding for what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, what you can improve on. That combination can really help players, I think. Yeah,
definitely. And I get the image that I always have in my head is Tommy Fleetwood. I don't know why. Like, I'll go on the golf course, and even though I wish I looked like how he swung it, I have that in the forefront of my mind, because he is that person that I see is the most, not the most prolific, but the most obvious in the golfers on tour right now in terms of arms and body all synced up. I mean, he has to be. It's all curtailed, short follow through, but there's so much speed in there, and it's almost like it comes to like an abrupt finish, but still balanced. And without being synced up, that wouldn't happen. No,
it's great. It's great to watch as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been watching so much golf. I don't usually watch it all, and I've been watching PGA Tour, European Tour, and I'm just like, oh, the weather for one, but then also like the golf swings. As a golf coach, it's actually, I guess, been quite enlightening, because I don't usually watch that much golf apart from the majors. So it's been nice to watch them and be like, oh, right, okay, yeah, that's really interesting, that. And put a bit more time and thought into it.
Yeah, and I think we can all, you know, there's stuff that we can all learn by watching the best players in the world. So Alex, that's our list of 7. You've given us a couple of tips in there. So things like putting the tee in front of the ball. Can you just finish off by giving us one good ball striking tip from your kind of toolbox of different things you use as a coach that will help somebody who's maybe struggling with their ball striking?
Yeah. So one for irons. What I do is golf ball down, put a little bit of a towel behind you. I'm going to try and avoid the towel hitting down on it. Is a really nice one. I really like that one because it's nice and simple. Another one is actually just with your longer irons, try hitting some punch shots, because you'll really get the feeling of trying to hit down on it more, because with a punch shot, we want to feel we hit down on it more. We want to reduce the loft. And I find it's sort of a middle ground for a lot of golfers to learn to hit down and trust the loft of the long iron. And you'll be surprised actually by that feeling of hitting down on it for many golfers, because you then get it out the middle more, you then create more spin, actually gives you a much better ball flight. So they're the two that I would definitely try.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Alex. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please do hit the like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Alex's YouTube channel. Alex has got loads of great advice, always publishing new stuff out there. It's just really easy. I would describe your stuff, Alex, as really easy to follow. And, you know, there's something in there for everyone, I'd say, no matter what level you're at.
Yeah, there's no real technical terms in there. It's just quite easy and practical tips for any golfer to try, no matter if you're good or new to the game.
Yeah, exactly. So make sure you go over and subscribe to Alex's YouTube channel. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.